Now, there's an interesting anecdote I'd like to share with you at this point, and it's another anecdote that differentiates the pragmatic approach to history from that of the realists and the idealists. Suppose we play up two pragmatic themes, right? One theme being that there is no such thing really as absolute truth, and particularly no reliably certain historical truth. And we play up the theme that what we're interested in education is that which works, that which gets the job done, that which succeeds at getting us to wherever we need to go in education. And then we consider, say, we're teaching an American history class, the story about George Washington and his having cut down the cherry tree, and his father then calls him into his study and says, George, I noticed that cherry tree got cut down. Do you know anything about this? And reputably, George Washington says, I cannot tell a lie, Father. I cut down the cherry tree. And suppose as a history teacher, a teacher of American history, you love this story, you've been using it for years. It's an example of George Washington's integrity, his honesty, and you want to play it up partly as a lesson in character, that if you're going to be the kind of person who socializes well and can become a right kind of leader, then you have to be more like George Washington. And so you fold that into your historical lessons. But suppose you're continuing to do some reading in American history, keeping up with the field, and you note that some American historians are having this debate over whether that anecdote about George Washington really is true. Is it true that George Washington really did cut down the cherry tree and confess when asked by his father, or is this story something that later biographers and hagiographers kind of constructed and grafted onto George Washington's biography, and so it's not really true? Okay, and so there's this ongoing debate then, say, within the field of American historical scholarship. You're, say, a high school teacher, and you've used the George Washington anecdote for many years, and you then run into this debate within the historical field. Next time you're going to be teaching American history, what then do you do? Well, we'll develop one line of reasoning here. It's going to be the line of reasoning that will drive realists and idealists crazy. What if we said, look, nobody really knows the truth here. It's ancient history. History is written by the winners. So whether the anecdote really is true or whether the anecdote is a later made-up story, nobody really knows. So the important thing, though, is for me as a history teacher to get the students to believe that having honesty and integrity is important, and to teach certain social lessons. And I have here an anecdote about George Washington that has worked beautifully over the course of my teaching career to get students to take this seriously. George Washington then is a hero in their minds, right, as a result of this story. If I don't think truth fundamentally matters or that truth is fundamentally accessible, I'm only interested in what works, then I am more likely as a history teacher then to say, well, I can in good conscience just carry on using the George Washington anecdote in future generations of students. Now, if we are realists or idealists, what we're more likely then to say is, and this would be very different, to say, no, truth matters here. And what's important to my character as a teacher is only to teach things that I know to be true. So I need to do further investigation here, read up on this debate among the historians. If it turns out that that anecdote was made up and is not truthful to George Washington's biography, then I should stop using that anecdote and find some other truthful anecdote that will make the same points that I want about moral education. On the other hand, if I read further into the story and it turns out that the historians haven't quite worked it out, then when I'm teaching the story, I should probably add a disclaimer of a sort. Say, now, historians aren't sure, students, whether this is really true or not, but it's an interesting story, and then with those qualifiers, go ahead and relate the anecdote. So do we take historical truth seriously and believe in it, or are we primarily interested in what works, and historical truth is an abstraction that may or may not be realizable?